Okay. Goeiemiddag, baie welkom by die laaste Silwerskermfees gesprek op die dekverjaar. Ons praat oor draaiboekverwerking, die verwerking van romans na draaiboeke, asook die verwerking van verhoogstukke vir die draaiboek. En al die deelnemers in die gesprek vandag het films by die fees. Langs my is Corné van Rooyen, sy vrou Renée van Rooyen het Toorbos van Danie en Marais verwerk tot 'n speelfilm en hy was beslis ook deel van hierdie proses. En dan is daar Tertius Kap, hy het Jacques Steenkamp se boek oor die Griquas-stadmoorde verwerk vir die speelfilm Griquas-stad deur José Malherbe. En dan het Saartjie Botha saam met Christian Olwagen gewerk aan die draaiboek vir Poppie Nongena wat gegrond is op Elsa Joubert se klassieke roman Die Swerfjare van Poppie Nongena. Brett Michael Innes het 2 films verjaar by die fees. Hy het gewerk aan die draaiboek van Racheltjie de Beer, die verhaal van Racheltjie de Beer. Hy het ook die roman geskryf waarop dit gegrond is. En toe die draaiboek saam met Matthijs Boshoff. En dan het hy ook Fiela se kind gemaak. Hy is die regisseur van Fiela, as ook die draaiboekskrywer wat dan Danie en Marais se klassieke verhaal verwerk het vir film. Right, so kom ons begin met 'n vraag aan elkeen van julle. Gisterand by die V&A na Poppie Nongena het julle vertel hoe julle vasgehaak het. En toe het julle vir Elsa Joubert gaan sien. So ek wil eintlik van elkeen van julle vra, met die films wat nou hier op die fees is, waar het julle met hierdie draaiboekverwerking vasgehaak en hoekom?
Dis my... Ja, hy is aan. Ja, is my moeilik om te praat. Ek wou Renée het die draaiboek vir Toorbos geskryf. Ek was regtig maar net 'n man en haar support deur dit en baie van haar drafts gelees en dan my terugvoering gegee en dit help in daai manier, maar ek dink dit was 'n baie lang proses vir haar. Sy het vir ek dink 7 jaar aanhou skryf en aanhou redraft en sy was by die NWF met die draaiboek. Ons was toe by kykNET, maar dit was nog nie reg nie, weet, en dan die draaiboek maar net 'n draaiboek raak groot saam met jou as 'n filmmaker. Soos jy groot raak die draaiboek ook groot saam met jou. En ek dink dit was nogal 'n belangrike ding vir Toorbos, is soos wyn, dit het daai maturation proses nodig gehad. Maar Hilary het gesê, Renée moet doen wat uit haar hart uitkom, Matthieu. Ja. En dit is wat vir my belangrik was. Ek het altyd Renée se passie, haar hart en haar siel vir die projek net probeer soveel as moontlik protect deur al die feedback wat terugkom. Daar's baie terugvoering wat kom, maar jy moet nog steeds waar bly aan wie jy is en jou gut feeling.
So ons kan sien dat Toorbos se premier 2 is, kan ons ook nou nie iets weggee oor watter dele van die boek weggelaat is ensovoorts nie. Dit moet julle dan 2 uur gaan sien. Maar ja, Tertius, in jou geval by Griquas-stad.
Die eerste struikelblok was seker toe Don Steenkamp nie ons versoek goedgekeur het om met hom te praat nie. So daar was een moontlike film waar jy fokus op sy storie en jy weet, dit dan balanseer met iets anders. So toe moes ons onmiddellik besluit, nou vertel ons die storie eintlik van buite af. So ons moes soek na 'n lens waardeur ons kon vertel. En gelukkig, min of meer aan dieselfde tyd, Jacques Steenkamp het my vreeslik baie gehelp, voorgestel aan mense in Griquas-stad en onder andere aan Dick de Waal, wat die hoofondersoekbeampte was. En toe ek hom ontmoet het, ek besef, maar daar is jou hoofkarakter, jy weet. Ook miskien 'n goeie, gelukkige keuse, omdat hy dan vir die gehoor, dink ek, 'n makliker manier is om te kyk na die storie as, want ons het deur Don se oë sou gesien het.
Die Poppie se draaiboek het gepaard gegaan met baie sigte. Daar was vorige pogings tot draaiboeke gewees. Ek het 'n eerste draaiboekpoging gehad wat 320 bladsye was. Die oefening toe was om alles wat ek dink in die film moet wees te probeer string. En uit die aard van die saak kan ons nie so film maak nie. Ons struikelblok was, hoe vertel jy 'n storie wat 36 jaar, ekskuus nou?
Ja, maar ek make it English in Afrikaans.
Yes, sorry.
Okay. Sorry.
Okay. We the kind of most difficult part of the script was actually to decide the period of time, and I couldn't do that. And the moment, so that was my blind blockage. The moment that I worked with the director, suddenly it was easier to make choices, to realign timelines. but still we had to, because this is a kind of very famous and kind of praised book, we had to have the permission from the author to change dramatically and drastically. And she actually didn't even ask us what we want to. So we had tea with her, and then she actually said, you can do whatever you want to, whatever the film and the medium need. So that was a release. It was not all the problems was not solved by that, but at least we could start with fresh energy.
Well, I think a clue to the solution is also in the title change, because it's not die swerfjare van Poppie Nongena anymore. Dis nou Poppie Nongena, want jy kan nie al die swerfjare wys nie.
Yes, ek het eintlik gesê dit word nou 'n moeilike lewe in die 'n moeilike week in die lewe van Poppie Nongena.
13 uur. Ag, ja. Fred.
Firstly, thank you for the generosity of welcoming this Englishman into your language and your culture. And now my boyfriend can understand what is being said because he's from America. There we go.
We'll keep
And there's
it
a
in
couple of
English from here then.
internationals. Yeah, maar baie dankie, ek waardeer dit soveel. For me, there's two things, I guess. I've got Fiela, where I'm taking one of the most iconic Afrikaans South African novels and having the pressure then of a film that's been done already about that. And then I had Draaiboek, where I wrote the novel that it's based on and did a few first drafts of it and then handing that over to Marais to direct. So when I was chopping things out or adjusting things in Fiela, I knew that the generosity that the Matthias estate gave me, I had to then extend to Marais, so that he chopped out a lot of my stuff from the book, and I really love what he did. I think I'll speak specifically to Fiela, is that the book of Fiela is three voices, Elias, Benjamin, and Fiela. It also feels like two stories put together. You've got the younger generation narrative of this mother and son trying to come together. And then it really takes a dramatic shift to Benjamin and Nina in the forest. And it's actually a love story then between him and her. For me, what really stood out from Fiela when I read the book many years ago and then reading it again was the mother-son narrative. So I was like, okay, I need to focus this, take out all of Elias's voice. Him and the grootvoete and all that stuff didn't fit in line with that narrative. And it meant being quite brutal, taking out things that people really do love, but making sure that we could then focus on the story which I felt that resonated with me and would resonate with audiences. There was also a very interesting structural change, and sorry for people who haven't watched the movie, but in the book, he goes to Fiela first, and then she says, you must go to Botha if you want to rid yourself of Lucas van Rooyen, and then he goes to Botha. But emotionally and on a structural level, if we are following this love story between mother and son, there is an emotional release when they come together. And it, with lots of conversations with the team of kykNET, asked, how do you feel if we have him go to Botha first? And she confesses and tells him. And then he goes to Fiela, so that we feel that peak of the emotion. And I think it was the right choice, and I felt it paid off there.
Yeah, well, you talked about scenes or characters people love, and I think that's the difference between, if you take a relatively unknown novel or story, you feel you have more carte blanche, I think, to do whatever you like. But all of you took a story that a lot of people believe they already know or they've heard, and then you don't have to only kill your own darlings, you have to kill other people's darlings. So maybe you'd each like to say something about where you felt like, okay, for me, for this to work, I need to do this and this, but I think people are not going to like that. Was there decisions like that?
I answered the same question the other night, so I'll go first. Yes, in our case, in Griquastad, a lot of the people are still living, and we use their actual names. So that was, quite a decision to make, but we were very comfortable. We got legal advice on everything. So you do feel quite nervous when you're writing, Benny Hekroot says, and you've never met Benny Hekroot in your life, So that was quite a challenge, and you do stress quite a bit about it. And to me, then the number one thing that was my major reward was after Dick watched it and said, no, he loved it, it's like no problems. Police procedure, maybe not, but said the story needed it, sorry. So yes, that it is quite stressful when you're doing that sort of dramatization of things that you weren't there. The only person who was there refused to speak to you, so what do? You have to come up with something that seems true. And the only way to do it is to go over the actual evidence in the court case again and again and again. And it's almost like you're playing the cop, because now that is what a cop does. He constructs a narrative of what happened when he wasn't there. So you become like a detective yourself, which is actually quite fun.
So,
No, he's got an answer.
Well,
nice, yeah.
yeah, it took me a while. Again, what for Toorbos, for Corné, was extremely important to be true and honest to the period and the time. And what did the poor white Afrikaner woodcutters sound like in those era? So she read so many books and just went to the library in Cape Town, and they got a whole team of linguistic, what do you call them? People, yeah, linguists, together with the actors, and for weeks they practiced how the people spoke. Not just the accent, but also the words they use. And I think that was the biggest thing for us, to stay true to that era. So when you watch the film now, you'll see that's one of the most rawest things, is how the people just express themselves in 1920s, and not the people in the town, the people that lived in the Nysna forest. Yeah. So she put hours and weeks into that. I mean, the actors, you'll see Lani, she's brilliant.
Thanks, Corné. Yeah. Saartjie.
There's different stuff that we could not cut. We had to have a child on her back and killed in an unrest incident. So, but apart from that, everything actually was, in the end, negotiable. For instance, we couldn't find two black male actors that can speak Afrikaans reasonably well, to play two very important characters, the character of Yakkie and the character of, and that's Poppie's half-brother, and Bonsile, that's her son. And then, basically 2 weeks before the shoot was supposed to start, Christian said, make them one. I said, it's impossible. I said, well, I cannot find an actor. Make them one character. And in the end, I think it actually worked very well to combine the two actors. And I went kind of working on this script for 5 years. Never ever. We've lost 4 brothers of Poppie. We've lost 2 children of Poppie. We've lost a whole the family, Steve family. We've lost all of that, but I really didn't think that it's possible to lose one of those 2 characters. In the end, I think we had a better character that could serve the medium.
So for me, on the Rachuki side, there's an entire storyline in the novel with an older brother and him falling in love with the young neighbor of the farm, and the tension between him and Herman. And when I handed the draft of the script over to Marais, he came back and said, I actually feel that this doesn't need to be here. We can just focus on things. And it was one where I stepped back and I was like, awesome, let's do that. So I think for me, that was, from the novelist side, one where I was like, okay, let's release that. And then when it came to Fiela, not so much on a script level, but when it came to actually filming, one of the scenes which we couldn't actually execute was that I wanted to have her breastfeeding a malnourished Benjamin when she found him. And you try get a 3-year-old to to breastfeed Fiela Kamuti, because I wanted to show this bond that formed between mother and son. And it just didn't work. I don't think the film loses anything by not having that, but it was one where we'd put that in and just it didn't work out very well.
Well, is there anybody who'd like to, because I know most of us, except for Toorbos, all of the films have been screened. So are there any questions that you are burning to ask regarding the adaptation, people who knew the novels, plays? If not, I would also like to ask Corné, are you very stressed about this blue carpet thing? Would you rather go and support your wife?
Yeah. I'm going to go support my wife.
That's okay. All the best. Best of luck.
That was too easy, Danie.
One more extra mic. But let's talk a little bit about these things of genres. In the art of the novel, Milan Kundera says that a novel is great when it does what only a novel can do, which obviously is the inner monologue of characters. So, what is a great adaptation? And how can a film improve on a great novel? I mean, is it just does it have to be judged completely differently?
The obvious contribution is visual spectacle, I think, that the film brings. So there's that, and then of course you have music, which is fantastic and basically plays the role of the inner voice, which we lose with the novel. I still think composers in film are probably the most underrated people in the business. And anyone who's seen a film without music and then watched it with the music knows that. So what the film can also do, obviously, is popularize it, bring it to a broader audience, I think, which is great for novels, and often bring a different perspective on what the novel actually is. So novels often do interesting tricks with narration, like unreliable narrators and that sort of thing. Film, you're external, so you have to see it from an objective perspective, which is a very interesting exercise then to do. So yeah, you lose a lot, you win a lot. But mostly novelists would say, they hate their adaptations of their films because it is a selective interpretation always. So yeah, but I think there are great adaptations, and I'll name a few if you give me a few seconds. Let them answer first.
You're welcome. But you haven't heard from Jacques Steenkamp yet. I just saw on social media that he was very sad that he couldn't be here for the premiere.
Yes, he was very sad he couldn't be here, and he was very happy to hear that the reaction was very positive. So
Okay.
yeah.
So you need to get a final verdict still.
Yeah.
Okay.
She threw the mic my way. So my model of writing with the last two novels, for Sunk and for Draaiboek, is that I actually write the script first, and then each scene becomes a chapter. And then I give that book to the actors, and then I've already written it knowing, like, okay, this is going to be playing this person. And for me, it's a wonderful tool as a director to explore the thought life of the characters and to get input from the actors, from just everyone who's surrounding this project. So for me, it's a helpful thing on I think a cinema level. When it comes to adapting novels that I haven't been involved in, I think if you are held hostage by having to do everything that the author did, you will never succeed in actually communicating what they did, and then you won't succeed in actually bringing it to life. So I think the adaptations that I really appreciate, like Gone Girl or Slumdog Millionaire, if you actually read the books, they are vastly different to what the movies ended up in. And I have to tip my hat to Gillian Flynn, who did Gone Girl, because she did the screenplay as well. And she made very bold choices to actually cut certain things out or bring certain things in. What I loved with Fiela is that there were some moments which are huge scene pieces in the film, which are 2 lines in the novel, or a point that she just makes on the side, but that really just resonated with me and affected me, that I was like, no, I need to have a 5-minute scene out of that. And then on the outside of that is this entire, our film ends 2/3 into where the book actually is, and you still have an entire narrative that goes on. And I think you're all grateful that I didn't go there, because you'd have a 5-hour movie if we did.
I think, and I'm more skilled as a playwright. There's not really so much in film writing, but what I've learned is that you have to do an adaptation of your adaptation. It's a double process to get away from the original source. Otherwise, it's too close, and you cannot do an adaptation if you're not bold. That's what I've learned with Poppie, that you really need to be fearless and bold and drastic. I think also structurally a novel, there's a kind of almost like an aftermath of a novel that could actually continue for up to 20% of the page count, and you cannot have that in film. You cannot have a long kind of, okay, let's wind it down now, okay, and now it's finished. You actually need to end very soon after the climax. And I think that's actually very easier said than done.
One notable exception being the third part of The Lord of the Rings, which ends forever. Yeah. but if you, in your case, or with you, Saartjie and Brett, you didn't only have books to go back to. You already had other adaptations. In the case of Poppie, there was a play that was very well known, and in your case, there was a previous film. So did you go back to those texts, or did you think that that would completely mess up the process?
I must admit I didn't read the play because in the contract it was stipulated that we're not allowed to use any dialogue in the play. So I decided I'm not going to read it at all, not to actually fall into that trap. And then at some point in time I realized maybe I must just check because there's also dialogue.
Whether you're not plagiarizing.
There's also kind of dialogue cut, kind of lifted from the novel. And then I was actually quite surprised in the way that they structured the play. It's a very, old-fashioned way with a narrator and playing out the scene, but it actually covered very much the same content than we ended up covering. It's just a different timeline.
And no narrator, no voiceover. Yeah, Brett.
So for me, I watched Katinka's film when I read the book as a 14-year-old, so I wasn't watching it through the lens of someone who's going to adapt it. And when it became clear that this was going to happen, I purposely avoided it because I never wanted any choices to be made either as a reaction to a choice that she'd make or as a copy-paste to that. I really just wanted it to be me going back to the book and seeing what resonated and bringing it through. That being said, after we would film, say, the scene where they've reunited, and I know we don't have the budget to even film this again, I'd go onto Showmax in my hotel room and I'd watch how it was done. I'd be like, wow, we did it very differently. And then it just affirmed to me that I wasn't trading on ground that had been tread before, because what's the point of doing it again if I'm going to copy something that has been done so well already? On a performance level, on a cinematic level, like we just, I think, had very different focus and rules. And it's that thing of honoring what has gone before us. And I have to really say well done to what was done.
Have you had time to think about the great adaptations yet? I mean, was there
Yes,
like things that you had in mind, like, right, this is the benchmark? Did you think of In True Blood when you worked on
Yes, I did think of that. I was more taken by something like We Need to Talk About Kevin, which is a great adaptation of a great novel. But probably my favorite adaptation is Adaptation, that you were making a joke about just now. So, yeah.
Yeah, okay. We Need to Talk About Kevin is a very interesting point because Lionel Shriver was here at the Open Book Festival, and she said that actually if you read the book, it kind of leaves the question open whether he is a psychopath or not, whereas the film actually makes it very clear that we're dealing with a psychopath.
Films typically do that, people want solid answers usually in film, and books have much more doubt and multiple interpretations always. So, and that's simply a difference of the mediums. A film usually wants a climactic ending where everything is put into some sort of place,
But yet, with Griquastad, you didn't go the what do we need to talk about Kevin way, because
Well, I would be happy if we didn't, because we tried to keep it a little bit open still. Even though all the important information has been presented and the narrative as we understand it is presented there, I think part of the theme of the film is this character whose job it is to stand for what is the truth, and it's a huge responsibility. It's a really tough thing to do, because once the cop says this is what happened, almost all of us are going to believe that is what happened, and so it's part of, we want to show that tension also, like, we're pretty sure this is what happened. 99.5% sure, but there's still that little doubt. And someone is sitting in prison right now, and, he has to own up for that. And to make it clear, I think he's right.
Yeah, but a little bit of doubt then. Were there any, benchmarks for you where you thought, this is what I need to do, this is what I absolutely want to avoid?
I started with the hours being my reference. I don't know why. But I think
Michael Cunningham.
Yeah, kind of thought there needs to be some form of time passing because we have to do all these long journeys. But in the end, I couldn't remember really why it was the hours. But I think initially that was the reference movie.
For you?
I think for me, what was important on a tonal level was I come in with respect to the work. Not having it serve my voice, so you will even see a lot of the cinematic choices with not if you've seen Sync, are not what I've done in Sync, but it was like, how do I serve the narrative and not have the narrative serve Brett as a director? So that fed into how I wrote the script. I think it was also it's interesting with a novel that has appealed to both white and brown Afrikaners, and a movie which has done the same, because generally a film is generally for one market very specifically, and yet to take one where if you look even at the percentage of page count and the percentage of screen time in the previous film, was very much devoted to Benjamin's narrative, to the Van Rooyens, and to feel quite clearly that I actually wanted to shift the dial to be down the middle, because now we're choosing two voices, the Kamutis and the Van Rooyens. So to make sure that on a page count level, on a screen time level, the Kamutis were given equal agency, equal time, and equal respect. I think dignity was such a big thing that I wanted to put into their family, because I think so often the representation of brown Afrikaans bodies on screen is either caricature or unhelpful things. And it was my hope that I'd be able to do that and lean into that.
And how did you make the decisions, if you talk about also things that were incredibly relevant in a certain era? Like, Fiela played a very important role in making people aware of other stories in, say, the late 80s, and then Poppie as well. Where do you come to the decision to say, but I believe this is still relevant? Do you need to believe that something about that story was misunderstood before, or do you because it's also a translation for a different age, or do you just stick to the narrative?
I think in Poppie's case, it's maybe very specific to this specific movie, is that if Fees Must Fall didn't happen, Poppie would have been a different movie. But because Fees Must Fall happened, and it's actually shocking if you look at pictures of 1976 and you compare it to Fees Must Fall, even some of the protest posters are exactly the same. And it's very clearly not kind of researched. It's immediate, it's impulsive. So I think in a way for the benefit of the film, we're lucky. I think in terms of the country, we are in deep trouble.
I think for me, before ever writing a script, I always thought as a writer, you have to dig inside yourself to find the story. You've got to go on this excavation to find it. And yet, I truly believe now that stories are things that are floating around us on a very natural, energetic level, that if I didn't tell Sunk, someone else would have told it with different names, but it's part of the zeitgeist of the conversation. And when it comes to Fiela Sekund, I believe that story is a gift to us for multiple generations. I do not own it. Katinka doesn't own it. I don't even think Dalian would say she owns it, but she was the person who sat down and she listened, and it was floating around, and she brought it down and gave it to us as a gift and as a mirror for that time, to show that love could transcend race, because that was the question that was being asked at that time. We're asking a very different question today, and while love is still such a key thing and part of the narrative of Fiela Sekund, it's been asked in a context now where we do question the mythology of the Rainbow Nation, where we're maturing in our democracy and looking at what we did right and what we've done wrong. And I believe Fiela is a mirror that we can hold up to ourselves, and if we listen, we will see ourselves reflected in someone else's body, and we'll actually have empathy for each other.
We talked now about adaptation, and we focused on the written word. So you have an adaptation of adaptation, you adapt a novel, and then you adapt it to the screenplay. But now the screenplay has to be translated again. And here it becomes tricky, I think, for all three of you, in the sense that you are now telling other people's stories, and these people are involved. And there's cultural sensitivities, there's a question of white people telling stories of people of color, that kind of thing. Here it's a community where you move into. How do you approach that then, that second phase of adaptation? Where does sort of directorial, final cut end, and how do you negotiate that? Is there anything that you've learned from these three films that were valuable to you in that regard?
I think in Poppie's case, it's a little bit easier, but also more complicated, because it's a black woman's story told to a white woman that then structured it into a novel. So it's a true event, the story of a life, kind of telling of a life, and surely there was nothing added. It's all fiction. There's geen fictie. It's all factually true to what happened. Names were changed here and there was dates changed, but actually it's all is true, and there's also no interpretation. And apparently originally there was a lot of interpretation, and Elsa, as the writer, was present in the initial form, initial drafts of the novel, and then she decided to take herself out completely. So it's a weird. We've got a weird document to work with. You are very much aware this is a black story, but you're also very much aware that it's written down by a white person. And then you actually then kind of guide yourself in thinking, okay, I'm writing now as a woman, trying to tell both of these stories because it's two different stories. So
It's also the Swanepoel story in this case,
Yes.
in the movie, yeah.
Yeah. So it's actually I could listen to some of the recordings. She was recorded on a tape, the original Eunice, and it was heartbreaking on the one hand, on the other hand, so beautiful to actually recognize exact sentences in the novel that was actually almost transcribed.
And
Look,
you've read, I think I was thinking when I was watching Fiela, I was thinking that on the one hand, the question that's going to be asked immediately, of course, is it's a white man and you're telling the story of a brown family, but also you're an English guy telling the story of poor whites a century from here. So that's also a translation process.
Look, I don't believe any of us had the right to tell anyone's stories. I really don't. No one qualifies. A man then cannot qualify to tell a female story. I, as a gay man, cannot tell a straight story. Fiela, firstly, is not just a brown story. It's a white story as well. It's an Afrikaanse story. I think if we go down that route of group identity politics and who qualifies to tell a story to its full extent, then we rob ourselves of the gift that is kykNET, because Oliver Hermanus has no right to tell that story. We rob ourselves of the gift that is Number 37, because Nosipho does not have the right to tell a male story. I believe that if you come with respect and you do your research, look, let's be clear, white filmmakers, and excuse my language, we have fucked up brown representation when it comes to cinema. We have not honored it in the past. And it is something that we really do need to address in how we write scripts and how we tell stories. But I've also seen brown bodies who have done the same mistakes. So I think if we actually take the time and we speak to the people who we are representing, that's why actors are such a gift for me, because they are playing the groups that they're representing often. And with everyone on Fiela, I was like, tell me, I'm a white dude, I have blind spots which I will never see. I need you to tell me if I'm misrepresenting your group, if I'm not doing it right. I truly believe the outsiders also brings a perspective that someone who is from the group cannot bring. Khalid Hussein, who did Kite Runner, he brings years of research in terms of Afghan, growing up in that context. But when you are from the group, you often feel the pressure to represent and to do it well and to make sure that you show it positively. So when, for example, if I'm to tell a gay story, I will feel that pressure to represent my group and my experience in a positive light, to almost play PR on that. But if you are if you're an outside perspective, you are not held back by that baggage. And often that lack of holding back has been used in disrespect. But I think if you're willing to put in the time and the research, I love black female perspectives on white narratives. That is such a gift. It shows me stuff I would never see. I think if we all fight over this piece of pie, we're just not going to have enough, but let's make the pie bigger. And this is where opportunity, that's what I lean into. There's too many white males telling stories. We really need black females, black males, just all the different races being given those opportunities. And I love seeing that those movements are being made by the people who are giving money. It just unfortunately takes so damn long. But that's what my 2 cents on that is.
Well, we talk about the fear of certain communities where stories come from. I mean, how was it with Griquastad? You already said, okay, I can't tell Don's story. Don's not going to speak to us. We can choose Dick de Waal as the main focal point. But you also, you shot in a Hope Field, right? So is there also a feeling of a double perspective? Like, I want the people from this area to respect the film, but do you also have an international viewer in mind somewhere where you feel like you need to translate that, or not at all?
Yeah, first of all, let's have another white male perspective on this issue quickly. I just want to latch on to what Brett said. The problem is, of course, if I were to write stories only about white 39-year-old males from Cape Town, it would be pretty boring. So writing is research. there is such a thing as bad representation and good representation. It's a huge responsibility to do it well, and it's research, and speaking to people, a lot of that. So, with regards to my sense towards the people from Griquastad, I didn't feel bad about them at all, because the things that they said to me, I did a whole tour of living rooms there and had a lot of coffee and brandy with people. The things they said to me were, in some cases, quite a bit rougher than what we allowed ourselves to represent in the film. Allegations that would have us in trouble if we put it on the screen about the Steenkamps and so forth, right? Which I won't repeat here. So I didn't feel like we are putting the town itself in a bad light. It's called Griquastad because, sadly for that town, this is what put them on the map. You know, they're famous for these murders now. So I'm not concerned that they will watch this and go, oh no, you misrepresented us, because I don't think that we did. I was, as I said, I was in their houses. I mean, I know what they look like, and I spoke to them. So I don't think we'll have problems there. Your question was also about making this also for international audience. Yes, certainly. We thought the issue would be tapping into current conversations around violence, gun violence. You know, one of the things I discovered in the research was that the number 2 nation in terms of percentage for family murders are the Afrikaners. There's no prizes for guessing who's number 1. That's the Americans. But there's something very interesting
great for
there.
that market.
So we're really looking to tap into that dollar, you know. No, we did feel that the issue was quite relevant in terms of masculinity, violence, all these things. So yes, we were hoping to do something broader with it as well.
Well, I think anybody else now would like to ask a question? People who've seen the movies we've discussed? Yeah, sure. Milan. Oh, there's a mic.
I think I'd like to ask advice, because I think it's one thing to be brave enough to take away from a film, the characters, maybe storylines and whatever. How do I give myself permission to add? Specifically, if it's a book that's well written, much loved, but I feel I look at the theme and I look at the angle that I'm taking on this book. How do I, because when do I have the audacity to add, make the scene longer, maybe add a part of it, like bring someone into the plot line or whatever?
I don't know. But what I can tell you is what I've learned through this process, and I don't think it's the perfect script in terms of Poppie. I think we've made huge mistakes. But be that as it may, what I've learned is that you cannot be loyal to the source. You need to be loyal to your immediate medium. So if you're writing for screen, your loyalty should be to the screen and not to the original source. But it's difficult.
Thank you.
To add to that, I think the beauty with writing is it's you and the script. So write a script where you add all that stuff in, and then you have safeguards. I had that through Karen and Jan and kykNET and Danie, like really just custodians who could be like, nah, don't do that, take that out. But you just get it out of you, because sometimes if it's in the back of your mind, you're going to be like, oh, maybe I should have done that. But once it's on the page, you can really see, actually, nah, that didn't work, or wow, this elevated the narrative.
Any advice from your side, Tertius?
I mean, I would repeat what these guys said. It's not to be too true. No, you want to be as true to the source, but there's also something like the spirit of the novel, which is a very vague idea. But I think once you recognize it and you can represent it in the film, you know it. So sometimes you feel like with just like Anna, we felt we got that. You know, that was the spirit of the film was there. With this one, it's a different situation. It's non-fiction versus film, so I mean it's broader. But yeah, I think it's being brutal. It's usually that. Being very clever about which characters to fuse, because you're always going to have to do that. Usually in a novel you have at least 5 times as many characters as you have in a film. So it's about picking which ones, and what's a good exercise is looking at the novel then and looking at the story function of each character. And often it shows you something, because there's a lot more texture in prose than there is in film usually. So texture usually you have to cut and you give it to someone else.
Anybody else? Yes.
I just have a question about representation. When, and this is for all three of you, like when you say good representation, what exactly does that mean? Is that when you say in a positive light, is that we're only showing the positive side, or are you trying to be as accurate as possible? Like, yeah.
I'll start, if you don't mind. We had this issue with Gesprek, a series that I recently did as well, and we were always asking this question, but villains of color, the white bad guy, the white good guy, and all these things every time. And absolutely every group should be allowed to be the villain, That is a good measure, I think. But there is such a thing as exploitative representation, which is to say that character simply is a foil for someone else. Historically, we have in Afrikaanse literature with colored people often being the jolly one. He's drinking and he's making a joke and he's like a little texture character. That's a classic example of misrepresentation. So once you feel that character can be sad in your film and can kill someone in your film and could be able to do whatever people do, then yes, it's a rounded character. So then it's fair, I feel.
I think in Poppie, the danger was that the white people are too nice. Some of the white people are actually, I felt at some stage, these people are really now too nice. But then, then you actually realize that people are not the same. You cannot have one stereotype telling a story that, especially in a country like South Africa, with such a complexity in terms of race and history. So I don't know if there's a formula to get it right. I think you try if you've got integrity, you will try your utmost best to do it as best as possible. But I don't think I don't think it's that easy to get it right. Yeah.
Firstly, the irony of three white people talking about representation is not lost on me. I think, it's not lost on me at all. I think it comes down to genre as well. So I'll speak to say you're working in a modern context. Maybe it's a thriller, so you're not dealing with, say, Fiela, which had very real race dynamics, which you couldn't break against. But it's like, who's in a position of servitude in your novel? Who's the guest at the restaurant? In your script. Like, it's not just the main character; it's the characters that are around the edge of frame. Like, I remember with. I was helping with some of the mentorship of some of the short films with Silwerskermfees, and just seeing how in films that weren't. That didn't require certain race groups to be certain things. It was that question of, why is this character white when actually she could be brown, she could be a male, like you could switch all this stuff up. It's to interrogate that. So I've written a script on domestic violence in a gay relationship. And the very real question that we've had to ask is, what is the race dynamic of this couple? Because they could be black, and I went down that route. For me, the majority representation of black male bodies is associated with violence in cinema. So I was like, okay, I don't want that. They could be a mixed couple. Whoever the violent partner is, I'm attributing violence to that race. And I settled on, actually, I want them to be white because I don't want race to change that. I wanted it to be that picket fence kind of suburban type thing. But it's that thing of, you've got to interrogate every choice that you put to a character. And what is such a helpful tool, I found, advice that was given to me with creating characters, especially your smaller ones, is give them a name. Don't just say officer or waiter. Your actors will be very grateful that you do this as well. But once there's a name, there's an identity, there's agency, and then you can start unpacking that stuff, and it's a very helpful tool.
Yeah. Yes.
There's so many stories in the world. Why choose to make a book into a film? I mean, Fiela Second has already been done, but why a book? Why not something new? I mean, there must be a specific reason all three of you went, this book is the story that I need to tell.
Me first. It wasn't my choice. I was asked to write it. I didn't say no, so fair enough. With this case, in the Griquastad case, I mean, the story was so powerful, and I felt it spoke to so many issues that are relevant that I thought, yes, it is worth making a film about this. I know people do like to ask that. Why? What is the point of this film? You know, and you could really ask that about any book, film, or anything. It's like, what is? I don't know. What is the point? Is it? You know, it's not. It's not trying to preach. It's not trying to send you a message that you must take home. And you know, it's representing something that is important in some way, relates to an issue that is important in our world today. And yeah, you can make your own mind up about what it means to you. So yes, I didn't make the choice, but I was happy to take up the job.
I also didn't. This was not my choice to do Poppie, and I think if it was there was vision in. I think it was really important. For me, I feel it's important that this movie has been made, and that the story has been told in a different format. But yeah, to be true, I don't think a scriptwriter or screenwriter would say this novel begs to be a film. But sometimes that also happens. I see a lot with new work that people sometimes write in a genre that it doesn't want to be a play. It wants to be a short story. It doesn't want to be a novel. So people sometimes have a fantastic story, but in the wrong format, or not in the format that will suit that story best. So, but it isn't. But I also think we are lazy. South Africans are lazy. We don't tell stories of our immediate present. So, because it's hard work to tell a story. It's not easy. It's not like a 5-minute conversation. If you really want to construct a story, you have to actually go and sit in front of that computer and spend time there. But I think there's wonderful stories and important stories that we need to tell that we're not doing.
So unlike them, I wanted to tell this story so badly. I am in love with Fiela. I'm in love with the Kamutis. I'm in love with this world. I was with Tashius actually at a publishing event, and we were chatting. He's actually the one who got me on this, because I was like, I heard that MBA had the rights. I was like, are those rights available? And when I heard they were, the next morning, I managed to get to Hilary Mathieu, and as luck would have it, she watched Sync that week, and we started this journey. For me, this is a love letter to my mom. Believe it or not, my mom is a Lebanese woman, so this short, fiery, very dark-skinned lady gets born. She gives birth to this white thing. And I just, as a teenager, was struggling with things of identity. That story spoke so much to me, and it was this idea that I love making movies. So why not? Why not get this, give it a shot and see if it could actually happen? And I think good stories can be told over and over. I mean, I'm not complaining when a new Romeo and Juliet happens, and Lord knows they do a new damn Spider-Man every 3 years. So, so I don't think we need to go that extreme. But I'm so in love with the story. It speaks to me, and I had to do it.
On a very practical level, I think a book that has a proven track record makes a producer believe that he will be able to get bums on seats.
Yeah, and to be fair, I think the Spider-Verse did a good job of mixing the Spider-Man story up a little. Anybody else who'd like to? Yes.
Hi, I just want to find out, so once you have the text, the original text, how do you begin to kind of break that down into something that kind of resembles more of a film narrative, that is more tighter and has fewer characters, is more streamlined? How do you kind of go about that process?
Invest in Final Draft. It's really going to change your life. Celltext is all right, but Final Draft is really worth the extra few rands, because the format is actually the template. You get the template how to write, and there's different functions where you can do character descriptions. You can even give costume notes. So you actually sit with this whole screen of possibilities. But in my, and then on a personal level, I think for me, I don't have any directing aspirations. So for me, it's very important to start working with a director quite soon in the process, because then you can actually make choices earlier. I think if you are not visual, not really auteur, I think it's good to have the director on board quite soon in your process.
So to jump on the final draft train, the new draft of it actually gives you a breakdown of the percentage of dialogue that women speak, that men speak. It actually gives you race dynamics as well, and it's a very helpful tool for that representation question. I think you've got to, from the beginning, you need to know what genre you're working in. Are you doing an auteurish thing where you have a lot more freedom to go? Do you need to stick to a structure? And from that point, then actually do a breakdown, find where the turning points are, what's the inciting incident for the narrative. I think the more you do that, the easier it is to spot it in a film. Structurally, Fiela was a very tough one to work with, which meant a lot of going back and forth. But I think knowing what it is before you even start is the best tool you can have.
Yeah, I mean, there's several practical exercises like taking the novel, which is usually jumping back and forth in time more than a film would, and writing it out in sequence, point by point. Once you get a grip on it, I love to pick my characters very early, pick my team that I'm going to work with, and then decide who I'm going to add to them. And then your main question is, of course, just where do you finish? And that's a great way to start always, is what am I building towards?
One of the things we haven't covered today, because we also said, well, the blurb says we're also going to talk about the adaptation of stage plays, dramas to film, and Tashi's, you and Saartjie both started out as dramatists or writing for stage. What are the very different snags there? Because we also wanted to have Amy Jefta on the panel to talk about Ellen, which was a huge happening last year. And we've had a number of plays that turned into movies. We also had Johnny Is Nie Dood Nie was a play. CMU translating. How is it? What are the major snags when you translate from stage to film?
Time is your biggest enemy usually, which is much tougher in theatre than in film, because theatre typically works with a much more realist time. So what's happening on stage is literally happening as we sit there. So film in that sense is easier because you get to shift around, and once you're done with two people, you say cut, next scene, Whereas in theatre you need to get them off the stage somehow. And you can only have so many blackouts and come up again. So in that sense, theatre is much more continuous, much more dependent on language. You have to really write a sort of, you don't have to, but in some sense theatre has more poetry in the language than film does. So it's much tougher to craft than in film. In film is much more visual, and if you're writing too much flowery dialogue in film, you're making a big mistake. Because as beautiful as it might be, it's not going to carry. So those are just two things. There are several, I'm sure. The presence of the audience is a fantastic thing in theatre, because it pushes the energy up so much for the performers. So there's that. I don't know what you want to add, Saartjie.
I agree. I think for me, one of the it's got to do with keeping focus. In a theatre, there's a wonderful game going on where the audience, because they cannot focus on everything at the same time, it's not a wide screen. So, but in film, you can actually show people exactly what you want them to see at a specific time. So there's a focus. Focus is very different. And then for me, silence. Silence on stage can be extremely powerful, but it's dead on film. It's really not reading. And darkness in theatre is dead, and it's reading beautifully on screen. So there's real kind of opposites. But I think and it's also what Tasha said, the poetry is in the visual. You can only have poetry in the visuals. It's not a dialogue-friendly medium. I really think film is a director's medium. Theatre is a writer's medium.
And to make it very concrete, I mean, if you think of, I think many people here may be familiar with Rooyen, one of your plays, Tashi's. Did you ever think like, I'd love to make a prison drama out of Rooyen? And then you had an interesting process with Liever, which was a play, right? Closer, then became a very famous movie, and then you translated it back to stage. I mean...
Well, yeah, I mean, not translated, it was a total sort of,
Yeah, exactly. Well, a rewrite.
Oblique reference to Closer. So with Rooyen, yes, I think it worked so well as a stage play for me that we didn't really think of doing Rooyen the film. No, I suppose it's possible, but I don't know if I want to. I did academic research on the prison culture and all that, which was I found extremely fascinating, and I think there's still a lot to be done there. Although we've had, Nume Skoli and these films, so it feels like we might be moving on from that sort of space now. To me, actually, writing theatre and film are so different that it's almost easier to me to go from a novel to a film than from theatre to film, I think. Yeah.
That's an interesting point. Anybody else here? I think we have a little bit, like 5 minutes or something left. 7 minutes. Burning question. Ilsa, not you.
Goed, ek dink Danie weet en Saartjie weet. I'm busy with my first screenplay for a movie, a feature film. It is the most difficult thing that I've ever done in my life, and I'm 57 years old. I think I'm going to be 80 when it finishes. It's hell of a difficult.
People are listening here.
Oh, I know. It really is. I'm a journalist, so I write every day. It's just the process is so different. But there's a book that I believe must become a movie. Die man met die 13 kinders van Harry Kamer. I thought it when I read it first, when it came out. I reread it after he passed away now, and I still think. And I'm wondering if adapting a book and writing a screenplay is maybe not a good first step into writing a screenplay.
You mean that it would be preferable to start from scratch and tell a story as a screenplay as to doing an adaptation?
Just to get used to the process, because the process is so different. I've written a book, I've written a novel, I've written non-fiction, I've done journalism, and writing a screenplay is just so different to all other writing. So I'm just thinking that maybe adapting a book into a screenplay is maybe a good first step.
I think maybe there's some form of truth to that, but adapting a book is like parallel parking in Beach Road, in a space that's just not big enough. So there's other frustrations, and there's public embarrassment if you don't get it right.
Ja. Cool squid.
I don't think there's a better description than that.
But I do think that people get afraid of these stories because there's an intimacy when you are crafting this thing, and if it's somebody else's novel, there's a little bit of distance. So you must just get through it. You do it. Have a structure and then do it.
But another interesting point for me is, if you want to write novels, you want to write poetry, whatever, you write as a reader. Now, do you write a screenplay as a screenplay reader? Is there something like, unless you're a commissioning editor, are you like avid screenplay readers? Do you take a screenplay to bed?
No, I certainly don't. There are fantastic screenplay readers that we don't really use so much in South Africa. A script editor, which is overseas a very, very, very useful person, which are people that can read your script and tell you exactly where you've gone wrong, and that is what they do. That is their sole function. We do have that in South Africa, but not as much. In terms of reading screenplays for fun, I've read some screenplays that I've enjoyed. I recently reread Natural Born Killers, which is actually, it's quite something to read. Tarantino writing for Oliver Stone. But in general, no, I don't see that I would actually do that. No.
It's hard work because the format is also not flowing. So you actually have to, stop, double point, go back. There's lots of wastage on the page. It's like, and lots of description. As a playwright, I prefer not to have any description in my scripts. And now, now suddenly you actually can get quite floral with your description in film. So so you get floral, and then it's kind of dialogue short, then floral again. So it's a baie hortende gelees.
And there's lots of capital letters which are strange.
But yet you always hear actors who say they fell in love with a script, but apparently it's no fun to read a script. So
I find for me, I don't like to have more than 2 long lines. So if you go into a third in a description, I find I stop engaging. I like having moments where it's like beat or pause in between every 3 sets of descriptors. As a writer, you've really got to get the musical or the editing pace to come across in the script. At least that's how I do it, because you want a person to read it. If 1 page is 1 minute, they should be able to read it in 90 minutes and feel that they've encountered the rhythm of the film, and it should be able to translate from the script so that the editor can already see where the cutting points are, where the pacing is, because at the end of the day, it is a visual language which you're translating from the text.
I think we have one last question, maybe. Ilse, maybe you want to say, oh no, time's up. Sorry. The premiere of Toorbos is about to start in 15 minutes, and I know I think it's fully booked on the app, but you are welcome if you don't have a seat yet to queue anyway. There are usually still some seats available. But yeah, thank you very much. It was great to be listening to you, and thanks for everybody joining in.